mentioned it at the top of the show. We have the nation's leader in offensive efficiency in Iowa taking on the nation's defensive efficiency leader in South Carolina. Now, a caveat to that, South Carolina's not that far behind Iowa in the offensive efficiency department there, but which unit do you think is better poised to seize the moment here today?
Which unit off the bench?
Which unit on the offensive or
defense?
defensive side for both teams? We know Iowa's got great offense.
More important.
South Carolina, great defense.
I think offense for Iowa is most important. Yeah, they're going to need to play efficiently. I expect South Carolina to be physical, not let them get to their spots. Again, changing up personnel. So Iowa will need to come out and get comfortable. Hannah Stuelke, honestly, was the most confident and most consistent player on the offensive end with her 23 points on Friday night. They'll need their guards to get settled in. A lot of uncharacteristic turnovers against Connecticut, especially in that first half. South Carolina will make you pay for that. So I'm going to say Iowa's offense has to be at its best and most efficient in this game.
Live ball turnovers will be the death of Iowa if they have a lot of those early on. I agree with you, LaChana, because I think South Carolina can win this game in a bunch of different ways. I think Iowa needs to win this game in more of a shootout like last year's game. Played in the high 70s. If this game's played in the 60s, to me, South Carolina's winning it. But I think South Carolina, with how good they are offensively, to your point, Sam, they could also win a game in the 70s. Yeah. But I think Iowa and Clark need this game to be more in the high 70s.
They need it to be, I think it needs to be 80 and up because that needs to be the pace of the game that they're playing.
Pace will play a huge factor in this, and we touched upon Camila Cardoso, but she plays such a huge role for South Carolina in the low post. She was excellent in the national semifinal game, so efficient. 10 for 12. She had 22 points, all 10 buckets in the paint. And oh, by the way, she did it in 3 quarters because they didn't even need her for the fourth quarter.
Ridiculous.
What's going to be Iowa's game plan to try and slow her down? I know we talked about it post-game with it being maybe Stuelke, but she's played the 4. So how do they try and slow her down?
Yeah, I don't think Iowa gets enough credit for the depth that they have in the post because when you look at Addie O'Grady, who has had double-figure minute games, she's also had a double-figure scoring game in the NCAA tournament. She comes in at 6'4" and gives you a little bit more girth, a little bit more strength. They've got Sharon Goodman, who hasn't played as many minutes as of recent, but she has started 8 games earlier this season, could give you, again, the physicality and some fouls. And then you could even look at A.J. Edgar, who, if they want to play faster and athletically defensively on Cardoso, they could put A.J. Edgar in with Hannah Stuelke, maybe do some trapping and still getting out in rotation. But here is the key. With Ashlyn Watkins rebounding the way that she is rebounding, you cannot get so consumed with Camila Cardoso and get out of position because they will kill you on the offensive glass.
It's a great point about Ashlyn Watkins. She could start for anyone else in the country. That speaks to South Carolina's culture and the way they've gotten their players to buy in. 20 rebounds in the Final Four. But I think you're right, LaChina. Iowa has some big bodies in there that a lot of other teams just don't have. They're playing Stuelke more at the 5 right now by choice because that's the lineup they like better. So against this team, which, you know, the size of Cardoso is unlike anybody else you'll see in the women's game right now, will we see some more Goodman and O'Grady? I think they'll pick their spots, right? And then you give Stuelke a break a little bit where she can, I mean, Watkins is not a break, but at least not have to worry about Cardoso and could use her as a trapper with her athleticism. And then what Zanano did offensively is also what Stolke's got to do, right?
Yes.
Use her speed to get by Cardoso and run the floor, even though, of course, Cardoso is a great floor runner as well.
Sure. 20 rebounds off the bench, the most of any player in the history of the women's NCAA tournament, is insane for Ashlyn Watkins. Hannah Stuelke plays a huge part in transition for this team. She can go free throw line to free throw line with the best of them. We talked about the transition game. South Carolina shut down NC State in that department. And coming into the Final Four, NC State actually had the most transition points of any of the teams here. So how do you see that matchup playing out today, KG? And how important is that transition game for Iowa going to be?
It's very important. I think South Carolina has great experience shutting down NC State's transition game, and you can almost translate that to Iowa. You don't want to let Iowa get threes in transition. That's their bread and butter. That's what Clark loves. And so South Carolina using their depth, they're not going to be tired in that fourth quarter, and just knowing the game plan of sending multiple players back and picking up the ball right away. If Clark gets a rebound, which is also where she's most deadly, right? She grabs a rebound and goes. You got to pick her up. Be in her grill the second she grabs that rebound. UConn did a really good job of that as well.
Yeah, I talked about Iowa's most comfortable defense being their zone. Their most comfortable offense is in transition and in their secondary. And I agree with Kelly. that you can't allow Clark to get a head full of steam coming down the floor. You got to meet her in the full court, and that's where South Carolina's depth really helps them because they can pick up and not get exhausted, right? Like I'm sure Nika Mule was. But you've got to be able to run with Stolke, and that's where Stolke has an advantage against Camila Cardoso. Quite honestly, is that Stolke can get up and down the floor quickly. She has a history as a track athlete. She moves beautifully like a gazelle when she's running in transition. And so if Caitlin Clark is able to get the ball and they get those long passes out, that is going to benefit Iowa offensively.
Well, South Carolina can play fast, too. Does pace of play favor one side or the other in this one, or do you think?
It has to happen for Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah. South Carolina can play in multiple ways, but Iowa has to have transition for their offense to run. Not that they can't score in the half court. They're obviously very capable, over 90 points per game, but it benefits them to play fast on offense.
And it's a certain kind of game. If it's a fast game because Iowa's turning it over and South Carolina's getting out and running, then that is bad news for Iowa. But like we said earlier, I think South Carolina can win in multiple ways. Iowa is going to have to get points in transition.
X factor for today's game for you?
Well, you think about last year's national title, the X factor was probably someone no one was talking about in Jasmine Carson, who came off the bench and hit all those threes. So I could see someone coming off the bench and having an impact in this game. Full Wiley is a good person to look at with her explosiveness. I also think Kate Martin is really big for Iowa. She was a calming presence for them in the fourth quarter on Friday night. Just a Wiley veteran, has the experience against South Carolina. She's going to have to be in double figures for me.
So I have two X factors, one for each team, okay? I am going to start with South Carolina, and I believe that Mylasia Full Wiley will have her imprint on this game. What I believe about Full Wiley is that this stage does not intimidate her one bit. Yeah. She will come in the game and play fearlessly. She plays with so much courage, just throws caution to the wind. So whether it's full court pressing and picking up Caitlin Clark in some situations, or just, doing something beautiful in the open court that gets the crowd into it, she has the ability to get the Gamecock crowd into this game, and she will need to do that at least in a moment in this ball game. On the other side for Iowa, I was going to go with the centers, with their depth, because I do believe their ability to guard Cardoso is important. But I'm going to say this. It's going to be rebounding. That will be the X factor. They need their guards to be in tuned on the rebounding side of things, or they need one of those bigs off of the bench to come in and have an impact on the glass. That is going to be the X factor. Can Iowa keep up with South Carolina in terms of the rebounding factor?
I'm glad we're talking rebounding, because I think, and LaChina, you've been around the game a bit longer, but I think South Carolina is the best rebounding program we've ever seen. And we know Tennessee was great.
I know Maryland may have something to say about that. Brenda Freeze.
They're giving me flashbacks there with Alyssa Thomas. But the way that South Carolina rebounds is tremendous. You don't have to necessarily win the battle. They've only lost the rebounding battle twice all year, but you got to be in there, and you got to be competitive in that.